House of Reps is not backing down on its invitation to President Buhari over the state of insecurity in the nation. It's our constitutional mandate, they say. And just how do you rate the government and the ruling party APC in the year 2020 in the areas of the economy, security, and the fight against corruption? But that's our focus for tonight. Compliments of a season and welcome. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Kikiolu. Well, just yesterday it was reported in some section of the media that some members of the House of Representatives had gone behind to apologize to President Muhammadu Buhari over that resolution to have the president brief lawmakers on the security situation in the country. You might recall that incident early December. Well, this, of course, followed the gruesome killing of over 40 farmers in Zabamari, Borno State on November the 28th, what is now known as the Zabamari Massacre. Well, the report went on to say the House of Representatives had dropped plans to invite President Buhari over insecurity with insinuations that this invite, may have turned into a North versus South battle and so on. But today, the House of Representatives is refuting the claims of any type of apology to the president. In a statement by the spokesperson of the House, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, titled Clarification on Apology to the Presidency, the House maintained that by that invitation, it was exercising its constitutional mandate as a critical institution of democracy. He also noted that the president nor the presidency never sought an apology in the first place. But here's more from that press release. And I quote, "The president or the presidency, as the case may be, never sought for an apology from the House of Representatives for carrying out her constitutional responsibility to the Nigerian electorate." Where then did the media get the report that the House as an institution apologized to anyone he asks? He went on to say that for the avoidance of doubts, the House never apologized to anyone for exercising her constitutional mandate, and the Ninth Assembly of the House of Representatives, under the leadership of Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila, will not do anything to desecrate or destroy the critical institution of democracy, that's the legislature. He goes on to say that we strongly believe that President Buhari subscribes to these democratic ethos and ideals as well. So that's from the House of Representatives. But don't forget that the president had initially agreed to honor that invitation. But then days after, he made a U-turn after the Attorney General of the Federation had said that the House lacked the power to summon the president. So if the House is standing by its invite, which it says is in line with the Constitution, and the Attorney General says that's not right, that might imply that someone is breaking the law and another is upholding it. Interestingly, one side is made up of lawmakers while the other is a chief law officer of the state. So really a lot happening right there. But that's just one of the numerous incidents that played out and is still playing out in the polity for 2020. So tonight on the program, we're going to be taking a look at those key areas. And the idea basically is to look at the welfare of Nigerians, economy, fight against corruption, COVID-19 as more as we score this government. But let us know what you think about the issues we're looking into tonight. Join the conversation via social media on Twitter at CTV Politics. But while you do that, let's start the conversation here in our studio. And joining us is Mr. Niyi Akishiju, Chairman, Buhari Media Organization. He joins us live from our Lagos studio. Mr. Akishiju, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you. By the way, compliments of the season.
Same to you.
So let's start by referring to our lead story, talking about the back and forth, if I could use that, between the legislature and the executive, especially the House of Representatives. So you recall the whole incident, the invitation that was passed to the president. And the question a lot of Nigerians are asking now is that, with the benefit of hindsight, looking at what has played out after that invite, don't forget we had the Kankara abduction right after the invite. Just days ago, we had Boko Haram attacking 4 villages for hours. So with the benefit of hindsight, really, do you think that the president's attending that session would have changed anything?
No, of course, as you also noted, there was no formal report or engagement by the president that he was going to respond to the invitation by the House of Reps or the House of Representatives.
Well, the speaker specifically spoke about that. Are you saying the speaker?
I said there was no formal, there was no formal report. We could only reference the speaker verbatim, submission.
Isn't that enough?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, a response would mean a written response to that, because the invitation would have been a written invitation.
What about the media aid on social media to the president, Loretta Onoche, who tweeted and even gave a date? We didn't have a date prior to that. So also, can't we stand on that?
What it means is that the protocol had not been concluded. There could have been different kinds of discussions and dialogue in the corridor of power, as it were, but there was no protocol to that effect.
So maybe that president's aide broke protocol by tweeting that?
There could have been different kind of discussions, like I said, and those discussions could come with different kind of weight, as it were, that could, push an aide to conclude, But again, there could also be some second thoughts after consultation that would have, informed the president's position. And there is yet, again, no response, no formal response from the president on either he will be coming or not too. So it's still actually in the realm of speculation, as it were.
So with the benefit of hindsight still, if the House were to resolve to invite the president, would you be advising the president to attend, to honor that invitation or not?
Well, I think what is at issue is the constitutional matter now. It's the constitutional implication of the president either going or not. It's not the content of the engagement. The president may be willing, as it were, but if there are constitutional issues, it will also be about precedents. It could be wrong precedents, it could be the right precedents, but that, of course, will also be resolved at another level.
Well, there's a wider conversation, really, about statements made concerning Nigeria, inching towards a failed state. I know you have responded to that, the Buhari Media Organization. The APC has responded to that. But let's take a listen to what Governor Sule said as we widen this conversation. We'll be joined by another guest in a moment, but take a listen to Governor Sule.
We have a lot to do in the areas of security, no doubt. There is no ambiguity about it. And I don't think anybody is going to tell you that we are doing fantastic in the areas of management security. But are we doing the best we can? Are we improving in other areas? That's the one I gave you the answer. I say yes. Are we having security challenges in Nigeria? I tell you yes. A lot of them. Nearly in every state of the Federation, we are having one problem or the other. But they are worse in certain places. They are worse, like in Borno State you mentioned, like in Zamfara, like in Katsina, like in that you have mentioned. It is true that we are having these kind of problems. And do you think Mr. President will sit down and be happy and enjoy that in his home state of Katsina there is insecurity and is happy? Of course not. He's constantly working also with this other people. But my concern is with people who think nothing is being done. We are a failed state. We are a this, we are a that. These are statements that are being made, by people who probably don't even mean well for Nigeria and don't understand what the government is doing and how the government is trying. I bet you, if these children were still in the hands of those who kidnapped them from Kankara, they would not even say Nigeria is running into a failed state. They would call us a failed state.
So let's broaden this conversation. We've since been joined by Professor Anthony Killer, Professor of Strategy and Development. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you caught part of the conversation just before you came. But now, listening to Governor Sule, I'm sure you probably have seen that editorial by Financial Times. But let me refer to the president's Christmas message, because this also adds in to the whole conversation. He talked about the security challenge. He says that, to be sure, the problems are beyond the simplistic options being bandied around. And now he goes on to say, we shall remain focused on following the complex, multidimensional route to reducing the incidence of insecurity to the barest minimum. Now, to me, this is basically saying we'll keep doing what we've been doing. First, is that what it comes across as to you?
Well, I think he said the right thing. There are two problems with it. The first problem is that he said it before so many times. There is something on social media compiled that shows how many times he's repeated this kind of statement. And because we've not had a different result, one would doubt the validity or the efficacy of such statement. That's where we have a problem. The other problem is, overall, and this is the problem I think we have with this administration, there is no sort of desire to take a quantum leap, to say, this is what we've done so far, you know, let's change it. Let's try to do it differently. What we have is a lot of things are complicated, you don't know governance, you don't know what's going on there. You know, it sounds like an oracle, almost like a mystic thing, not a democratic government. You can't run government like that in 2020. I heard the governor speak earlier on. Look, nobody says Finland is a failed state. Nobody wakes up to say Germany or even a state that is not doing well is a failed state. It's not whether you like me or not that I'll say you're a failing or failed state. There are indexes. It's something you don't say because you don't know me or you don't like me. You have to take point by point. They might be wrong. You know, let's keep an open mind. You have to take on point by point the indexes that make a failed or failing state and challenge those indexes.
It's interesting, rather, you talk about points. So let's take a look at the president's 9-point agenda. I'm sure Mr. Akishiju can recite that by heart. So this is the 9-point agenda of President Buhari. Prior to that, we had some sort of 3-point agenda: security, economy, and fighting corruption. But this is 9 points: to build a thriving and sustainable economy, enhance social inclusion and reduce poverty, enlarge agricultural output for food security and export, attain energy sufficiency, expand transport. Also talks about business growth, access to quality education, build a system to fight corruption, improve governance, social cohesion, and security. Basically summing up, the plan of this government. So, Prof, looking at those points, just before I bring in Mr. Akishiju yet again, do you think we are on the right path?
No. The short answer is no. I'm very worried. Let me start with my own constituency. You can't talk of qualitative education in a tertiary institution. It's on strike for whatever reason. You know, by the way, shame on ASU as well. I've said this and I've written it many times. A country that cannot prioritize, that cannot feel that there is something dangerously wrong for thousands of young people of that age bracket to be outside institutional, legal, scheduled engagement, that cannot see the calamity of that and cannot, because of that sense of urgency, get together and find a solution. There's something wrong with the leadership. I'm here, you know, it's not just the political leadership here. You know, I take it home, the academic leadership as well, because at some point, somebody should have given up and say, you know, for the greater good, let's do this. My colleagues say they've given up so much. That's one thing. But that's one of the 9 things.
Oh, yes. Now, the first on that list is the economy. Just before we go to break, Mr. Akishiju. So, building a thriving and sustainable economy. That's the first point on that agenda. And a lot of Nigerians would love to see that happen in reality, but see what has happened. Now, Nigeria's GDP contracted by -3.6 in Q3, -6 in Q2. So, essentially, we're in a recession. But that's not the only thing. You see that unemployment rate increased to 27.1. Our inflation is at 14.8, still increasing. So those are the indices we have regarding economy. I would like you to respond to this, especially try to tell Nigerians the justification for this, especially because on that list, building a thriving and sustainable economy is number 1, but we need to go on a break. So, I mean, you have some time to think on this, and when we return, we'll continue this conversation. So please, gentlemen, stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Mr. Niyi Akishiju, Chairman, Buhari Media Organization, as well as Professor Anthony Killer, who's a Professor of Strategy and Development. Gentlemen, thank you for your patience. So, Mr. Akishiju, I was talking about Nigeria being in a recession. unemployment rate at 27%, inflation, which is rising by the days. Any justification for this?
Well, the year 2020 is one year like no other year. We're talking of the year of COVID-19. And it is not particularly about progression. You know, the year comes with its own very huge and peculiar challenges. It is not, the year 2020 is actually a year of managing losses and challenges. Yeah. So you cannot be looking at growth. You are looking at a compulsion of destruction, as it were, you know, as facilitated by by COVID-19. The basic measure in containing COVID-19 is reduction in distances. And when you reduce distance, I mean elongation, creating distances, social distance. What social distance translates to in economy is reduction in transactions. When you reduce transactions in economy, it impacts on all indicators of the economy. You know, so if you're talking of GDP, if you're talking of inflation, either cost push or whatever push you are looking at it, inflation will be impacted. People who are supposed to produce are not producing. People who are supposed to buy don't have enough to buy. People who are supposed to work more in terms of our GDP are not working. So is it a mere coincidence,
that this is a second recession in the lifetime of this administration? We had one in 2016, which, by the way, was the worst in 20 years for Nigeria. Is that a coincidence then?
It's not a coincidence. It's happened. It's, I mean, all geography, you know, all jurisdictions across the world would one way or the other be impacted with some of these unforeseeable, events, you know. In 2016, and I can tell you, flick back to 2014, 2015, Buhari, when he got into office, stopped the general decline of the economy, you know. Between 2014 second quarter and 2015 second quarter, the economy was more or less in a free fall from a high of 6.53 in second quarter 2014 to a low of 2.35 in second quarter 2015. It was when he came in that he stemmed that fall and took it to 2.85, despite the reason, you know, for the GDP, the fall of the GDP. And what's the reason?
Right.
Fall in crude oil.
You know, that's interesting, because right after that, we've not really done as much as your government actually promised to do. You promised 10% growth. But let me bring in Mr. Killer, really. Professor Killer, pardon me. Could the economy have been handled better?
Well, I think so. I mean, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I do think so. I mean, what my colleague has described makes sense. You know, force of nature. So you have pandemic, you have reduction in transactions, you have limited movement. But that is nature. The essence of governance is to maneuver nature. Whether it's public governance, private governance, or family governance. Children will be hungry. The essence of having a mommy, a nanny, a daddy is somebody that cooks so that they don't die of starvation. So you look at what is happening in the world, then you ask yourself, what is my government doing about it? Some countries have devised different kind of measures. You know, there are fascinating literatures to say to how people are dealing with the same case that the world has. I think when it comes to how we deal with it, that is where we fall flat. It is not the fault of government that COVID came to the world. The question is, what has the government done about it? You talk about the slide into recession. There is a literature one needs to remember, since we're here, because of young people, who links the first recession we've had in the last 20 years with the inability of the government to be dynamic once it was sworn in. Because we had months without nominated people that were, as it were, driving activities of government. There were no ministers, there were no secretaries. That had an impact. We shouldn't hide that. That said, there are other instances. You see, the point is, what are we doing about it? You know my school of thought as an economist. I've argued publicly that when we were doing the money trade and we're sharing money thing, what we needed to have done is to incentivize employment. Rather than, I said then and I wrote that the government is going retail. Instead of going retail, The government needed to go wholesale.
Oh, you're referring to the social investment
The
program.
social investment program.
All right.
I think it's like the 9 program, like 9 agenda. I think it's a good idea. The problem is, how do you drive it? The social investment program. So you want to say?
Pardon me. I just wanted to bring in, because you talked about dynamism.
Yes.
And there's also this talk about cutting cost of governance, because largely this government talked about, building a system to fight corruption. And we've seen over time that, the budgeting for governance, as it were, has been huge. So quickly, would you rate this government high in that area?
I think there's some embarrassing spots, because really, I think the problem of corruption is a very complicated, very complex problem. I think this government did not invent it. But I think 2 things. Number one is that this government has missed some symbolic moves that it could have done. E.g., specifically, the budget of the villa. To actually look at that specific one and say, it used to be done this way, as from now on, we're cutting ABC. It could be populistic, it could be symbolic, those are big things. The other thing I think is that the government is dealing with, I think in a good heart, I really believe that this government genuinely wants to fight corruption. But I think the method is analog, is archaic. You have to go digital these days. If you really want to fight corruption in Nigeria, I'll tell you what you need to do. 3 Ds. You need to devolve power, decentralize authority, and digitalize operations.
Interesting. Now, here's more, just to add to what he said, because he referred to the arrest and eventual investigation of the former acting chairman of the EFCC. And for him, he says that for corruption to be seen as alive and thriving under the president's watch and close to the president is a damning political indictment on the president.
Yes.
Those were your words.
You quote me verbatim, yes.
In that context, really, fighting corruption, we've seen other incidents. How would you rate this government?
No, don't let us jump to that. Let me quickly make some reactions to, especially to the first 6 months of 2015, the first 6 months of the president. I told you that Nigeria was in a free fall, GDP-wise, from 6.53. Second quarter 2014 to 2.35. That's more than 4 percentage points decline. The first 3 months, third quarter 2015, President Buhari took the economy from 2.35 to 2.85 when there was no ministers. It was only engaged in palm sec.
Yes,
and the reason was that the government was not properly handed over to him, and we all know that. So the 2.85 increase is an increase, it's not a decline, okay? And fourth quarter was 2.11, a marginal reduction as a result of the bombings of crude oil pipelines and all that. So the implication is that you cannot measure that as a negative, arising from that.
You took it from where it was falling from.
It was falling and you took it off.
But in the context of the promise that was made in the ARGP, 10% economic growth, GDP growth.
ARGP, no, was not 10%, please. You'll check it again.
Okay.
ARGP was a maximum of 3.5, scaled over a 4 years period. And ARGP came in 2017, not 2015. So what I'm saying essentially is this. Today, the Nigerian economy is rated as the 26th largest economy by IMF itself. And you know how critical the IMF is of Nigeria. Right. It's rated today as, that is the 2019 rating of all national economies, 196 economies. It's rated 26. In fact, in some reports, you will see 25. That is one. Then 2, in the year of COVID-19, second quarter, when everywhere was ravaged, by the COVID-19 thing, Nigeria actually grew. It depends on where you're looking at it. The second quarter result was 6.10. Okay, the third quarter result came at 3.6%. At 3.6%, what it translates to is that we actually grew, and underlying grew by 2.4%. We did not decline. And you can now also relate that to other bigger economies. The U.S. economy, you are talking of even unemployment. The U.S. economy had 20 million unemployed people created during this period.
We actually have been growing in terms of unemployment, but On a final note, Prof, just to get your closing thoughts,
Yes.
we're looking at 2021 now. If there were one thing you could tell this government to sort, what would it be?
Well, I think this government needs to say, let's do it a different way. The 9-point agenda is fine. Let's do it differently. Let's talk more. Let's be more communicative. Let's be more modern. Let us deliberate more. Let us consult more. Because honestly, people who made this government happen, I'm one of them. They're not happy with it. This is not the promise. This is not the consensus that was built. We're managing it. The struggling is too much. Let us think differently.
Gentlemen, clearly this conversation is far from over, but I'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Niyi Akishidu, Chairman, Buhari Media Organization, as well as Prof. Anthony Killer, Professor of Strategy and Development. We thank you so much. Thank you for taking our time, by the way, of Yuletide to talk to us.
A pleasure, as always. Thanks so much.
So that's our program for tonight. Thank you for being a part of it. Do have a good night.